During Sarah Martinez's lecture, the entrance unexpectedly flung wide open. Stay totally still. Many military officers attended the meeting for former service members, arms at the ready. Sarah's coffee cup shattered on the ground as powerful. Hands jerked her arms back. Sarah Martinez, you are being held for deception and bogus military claims. The other veterans sat in startled silence as she was carried away in restraints. The evening had begun ordinarily. Tuesday evening at Riverside Community Center. 12 former military members sat in a circle, mismatched seats. The overhead illumination threw lovely shadows on faces with undetectable scars. Sarah had been attending these gatherings for 8 months, consistently choosing a window seat, always arrive exactly 5 minutes ahead of schedule. She rarely participated in talks, but when she did, her insights were so profound that others leaned closer. To listen, tonight felt different. Marcus Webb, an ex-Army sergeant, carrying additional weight and harboring bitterness, had been dominating the conversation with progressively inflated stories about his Afghan deployment. Sarah listened closely, her jaw tightening with each falsehood, until Marcus claimed to have single-handedly destroyed an entire Taliban stronghold. That's not reality, Sarah interjected. Her comments sliced through Marcus's bravado like a dagger. One person cannot assault a complex alone. There are procedures, support teams, and exit strategies. This isn't a computer game. Marcus's face turned red. What would you understand about it, sweetheart? You fix cars for a living? Silence permeated the room. Everyone knew Sarah worked at Jimmy's car repair shop downtown, where her hands were soiled with grease, and her petite frame was covered by coveralls. To Marcus, she appeared unremarkable. Petite and quiet, with shoulder-length brown hair styled in a sensible ponytail. I understand because I experienced it, Sarah said, her voice firm despite her trembling palms. Syria, 2019. Our unit received orders to infiltrate a high-priority target compound near Raqqa. Intelligence indicated they were holding American hostages. The group exchanged looks. Sarah had never supplied explicit specifics before, instead making broad references to overseas military duty when pressed. Now she spoke with the clinical precision of someone giving a mission briefing. We entered at 0300 hours with a 4-person team. The intelligence was incorrect. It was a trap. Oh, they were waiting for us. Her voice got far away, her gaze set on someplace beyond the water-stained community center ceiling. The first IED destroyed our communications. The second... She unconsciously stroked her collarbone, which revealed 3 parallel scars beneath her flannel shirt. Marcus chuckled mockingly. Right? I suppose you were Navy SEALs or Special Forces too? His tone was sarcastic. Come on, lady. Women aren't even permitted in SEAL training, much less combat units. Sarah gazed straight into his eyes. I served with SEAL Team 6 in Special Maritime Operations. My call sign was Phantom. The room erupted. Half the veterans laughed, while the rest shifted. Uncomfortably, Marcus grabbed his phone, swiping across the screen. I'm reporting this. Stolen valor is a federal crime, and I won't sit here listening to some wannabe mechanic lecture real soldiers. Sarah stayed composed while Marcus called the military police hotline. She remained absolutely calm, her breathing controlled as he raged about bogus claims and impolite civilians. Other veterans sought to calm the scene, but Marcus was beyond reason. Do you want to know what genuine combat looks like? Sarah inquired quietly as they waited. It's not glorious. It's cradling your teammate as they die in your arms, while you're chained to a chair and they scream your real name repeatedly until someone finally breaks and tells the enemy everything they want to know. The room became completely silent. Marcus also stopped pacing, spending 4 months in a cell too small to stand in. Eating rice crawling with insects while they try to break you with everything from electric shocks to waterboarding. Escaping by killing 3 guards with a piece of broken concrete, and then traveling 47 miles across hostile territory with a dislocated shoulder and internal bleeding. Her tone never changed. She recounted the information as if reading from a grocery list, but she had to clasp her hands together to keep them from shivering. It's returning to a country that erased all records of your service. It gave you a new identity, and ordered you to forget everything that happened because it was too classified for the history books. It's working as a mechanic because that's all. They could arrange that wouldn't require a background check that might expose operations that officially never occurred. That's when the door flew open. Sarah saw her reflection in the window of the police truck as it drove away from the community center. She looked just like what she was supposed to be. A 34-year-old mechanic living alone in a studio, apartment above a Chinese restaurant on Broadway. Someone unimpressive, someone forgettable. Someone who obviously wasn't a decorated warrior with more proven kills than most individuals have birthdays. However, the 3 scars along her collarbone revealed a different story. Admiral Rebecca Torres was about to get a call from an unofficial secret FILA call that would change everything. Detective Ray Coleman slammed the case file closed. At 2:47 a.m., the sound resonated around the empty bullpen. Sarah Martinez had not cracked once during her 3-day grilling. Every previous stolen valor case he'd worked on went apart within hours. The fraudsters frequently misrepresented basic military facts, misunderstood ranks, or were unable to explain missing documents. But Sarah was different. Sarah was a damn enigma, dressed in coveralls and engine oil. Coleman massaged his sleepy eyes and reopened the file, scattering the documents around his desk like unconnected jigsaw pieces. On one side was a woman who did not appear in any military database, no service records, discharge papers, veterans benefits, or anything. On the other hand, someone who was well-versed in details that made his 20 years in law enforcement appear insignificant. The first red flag appeared during the second hour of the initial interview. Coleman had attempted the normal ploy of throwing around bogus military jargon to see if she'd bite. "So tell me about your experience with tactical soup sandwiches in the field." Sarah had looked at him as if he had grown a second head. "No such thing as a tactical soup sandwich, detective? That's not military jargon. You got that from a bad movie. When you say soup sandwich, you mean something completely screwed up, but you don't put tactical in front of it. Are you actually testing my knowledge, or do you not know what you're talking about?" Strike 1 for the detective. Strike 4 had been devastating. Coleman had brought in Sergeant Major Patricia Hayes from the local recruiting station, believing that a real military specialist might reveal the fraud. Hayes had grilled Sarah for 30 minutes, covering everything from fundamental training requirements to sophisticated combat skills. Sarah had answered each question with the casual clarity that only comes with first-hand experience. Hayes asked her to describe the sound of incoming mortar fire. "Depends on the distance and trajectory," Sarah said promptly. "Close impact sound, like freight trains and thunder combined. Distant ones, whistle-hyped, almost musical before the explosion. But the really dangerous ones, the ones coming straight at you, they don't whistle at all. They just arrive." Hayes had turned pallid. She drew Coleman aside, her voice shaking. "Ray, I've been in the Army for 18 years. I've done 3 tours in Afghanistan. That woman just described incoming fire better than most veterans I've spoken with. Either she's the most dedicated fraud I've ever encountered, or she was trailing off, or what? Or she's telling the truth, and that photo is completely wrong." By the second day, Coleman was losing sleep. Sarah's information was more than just correct. It was specific in ways that appeared classified. She'd identified weapon systems that weren't supposed to exist, techniques that he couldn't find in any manual, and operations that were not public knowledge. "Tell me about your training," he'd asked during one session. "Which part?" "Basic underwater, demolition, advanced marksmanship, survival, evasion, resistance, and escape. The specialized programs that don't have names? The specialized programs." Sarah had given him a long look. "Detective, if I told you about those programs, you'd either think I was completely insane, or you'd have to kill me to protect national security. Neither option seems particularly appealing." Coleman had made a breakthrough, if you can call it that, when she brought in Dr. Jennifer Walsh, a PTSD psychiatrist. Walsh was supposed to assess Sarah's mental health and decide if she was insane or simply lying. Instead, she came out of the session looking as if she had seen a ghost.
"Ray, we need to talk privately." Walsh's hands shook as she grasped his arm in the corridor. That woman has endured trauma that would destroy most people. The way she describes her captivity, the detailed knowledge of torture techniques, the psychological markers. You can't fake this, Ray. This is real, not a hoax or a delusion. But there's no record of her service. Then maybe the records are wrong, or maybe they don't exist for a reason. Coleman did something he'd never done in his 20 years as a cop. He began making unauthorized calls to various agencies, posing cryptic concerns concerning black operations and covert military formations. Most had hung up on him. Some had told him to drop it and forget he'd ever asked. One, a retired FBI agent now working for an unidentified federal agency, had listened to his questions in total quiet before responding. Detective Coleman, you're about to wade into waters far deeper than you can handle. My advice is to file the paperwork, drop the charges, and move on. Assuming this woman is real. But Coleman couldn't let it go because, on day 3, Sarah did something that changed everything. He'd been grilling her about her purported escape from captivity, wanting verifiable information. Sarah had been patient, almost kind in her comments, as if she were speaking to a kid who didn't understand basic principles. You want proof, detective? Something tangible. She rolled up her left sleeve, exposing a forearm covered with what looked to be random scars. These aren't random, they're a map. Coleman had leaned forward, despite himself. Latitude and longitude coordinates carved into my arm with a piece of broken glass during captivity. The coordinates of the mass grave where they buried the other hostages, the location where they held me for 3 months, the GPS coordinates of the weapons cache they were planning to use for their next attack. Coleman had traced the wounds with her finger and discovered that they were not at all random. They were numbers inscribed deep enough to remain forever and precise enough to be practical. Detective, I remembered everything. Every face, every voice, every detail of that compound because I knew that someday, someone would need that information. The question is, are you brave enough to verify it? Coleman had been staring at the scars for a full minute, his mind racing. If Sarah was lying, she was the most brazen fraudster in history. If she was speaking the truth. If she was telling the truth, someone very powerful had gone to incredible efforts to obliterate her existence, and someone was about to discover that their small-town police department was slowly unraveling a perfectly crafted fiction. Coleman had picked up his phone and asked one inquiry at a time. It was time to make a decision that may either terminate his career or fundamentally alter his understanding of the war on terror. He dialed Admiral Rebecca Torres' phone number, which would connect him to a secure facility that did not officially exist. Admiral Rebecca Torres had not attended a civilian police station in 15 years. However, the encrypted message from NCIS smashed her Tuesday morning like a sledgehammer through glass. She was reading budget data in her Pentagon office when Agent Martinez, no relation, arrived with news that made her blood freeze. Ma'am, we have a situation. A Sarah Martinez has been arrested for stolen valor. She claims to be former Navy SEAL Team 6. The local detective is asking questions about classified operations. Torres had dropped her coffee mug, and the dark liquid had poured across classified documents like spilled blood. What did you say the name was? Sarah Martinez, ma'am. 34 years old, currently working as a mechanic. I'll be there in 2 hours. Torres had some time to contemplate on the drive from Washington to the small Pennsylvania village. Thinking was the last thing she wanted to do. Sarah Martinez. The name belonged to a ghost, a lady who was presumed dead and hidden in a classified file so deep that even Torres had special permission to see it. Ghosts had a way of returning to haunt you, especially if you were the one who killed them. Now she marched through the Riverside Police Department as if she owned it, her dress blues commanding immediate respect from every officer she passed. The medals on her chest represented 30 years of naval intelligence operations that altered the world in ways most people would never know. However, none of those ribbons signified her greatest accomplishment or her most catastrophic failure. Detective Coleman met her at the front desk, a man who appeared fatigued but had intelligent eyes and a jaw that hinted he might be trouble. Admiral Torres, I have to say, I wasn't expecting. Torres interrupted him with a glare that had scared foreign officials and terrorist commanders alike. You're about to enter waters so deep they don't appear on any chart. Where is she? Coleman walked her through a maze of passageways, quickly discussing evidence, jurisdiction, and correct processes. Torres allowed him to speak as she considered all of Sarah's possible survival scenarios. The most recent intelligence assessment said unequivocally that all members of Unit 77 were killed, their remains recovered, and they were buried with full military honors at Arlington. Torres had personally presented folded flags to their families, looked Sarah's mother in the eyes, and lied with the practiced ease of someone whose duty was to keep national secrets. But if Sarah was alive and had miraculously survived, "She won't break," Coleman said. "Won't budge. She's been here 3 days, claiming she was in some classified unit, that her records were erased. I've never seen anything like it, Admiral. Either she's the most dedicated fraud in history, or she's telling the truth." They paused at questioning room 3 and looked through the one-way glass. Torres noticed a petite woman sitting very still at a metal table, looking older and worn out from years of living a lie. But her posture was unmistakable. She sat like a soldier, even in civilian clothing, and after all this time, Torres felt the weight of 5 years of shame fall upon her shoulders. She had dispatched 12 of the Navy's best fighters to their deaths. 5 years of bearing the burden of Operation Nightfall, the mission that was supposed to finish the war on terror but instead resulted in disaster. "I need to speak with her alone." "Ma'am, this is an active investigation. I can't just..." Torres turned to face him, and something in her eyes made Coleman take a step back. "Detective, what I'm about to tell you is classified at the highest levels. That woman in there isn't just a veteran, she's a weapon. A piece of military hardware designed to do things that would terrify you. And if she's really who I think she is, then we have a problem that extends far beyond stolen valor." Coleman gulped hard. What kind of problem? The kind that could start a war. Torres approached the interrogation room alone, her heart pounding against her ribcage. Sarah looked up, and time paused. Torres returned to the briefing room at Naval Special Warfare Command, looking at 12 women who had volunteered for the most perilous operation in SEAL history. "Admiral Torres." Sarah's voice cracked like a teenager's, and her carefully kept demeanor crumbled in an instant. "But, they said you were dead. The whole unit. They said everyone was Kia." Torres sat down gently, looking at the woman across from her. Sarah appeared to be a normal person who had never used a weapon in anger. But Torres knew better. She knew what was beneath the mechanic's coveralls and the flawlessly manufactured everyday existence. "Show me your left shoulder blade," Torres asked softly. Sarah hesitated, her gaze darting to the one-way mirror. "Admiral, there are people watching." "Show me." Sarah slowly turned and lifted her shirt. A little black anchor with a trident could be found beneath a beautiful butterfly tattoo that had clearly been done later. Torres was taken aback by the figure underneath, 77. The unit that had never been officially established. The program was so deeply concealed that mentioning it was considered treason. "Jesus Christ," Torres whispered. "You're actually alive." Sarah turned around with tears flowing down her face. "I've been trying to tell them for 3 days. I've been trying to tell someone for 5 years, but no one believes me. You made sure I don't exist anymore, so you could accuse me of that." The charge struck Torres like a physical blow. Sarah was correct. Torres had sanctioned the cover-up, deciding that the truth about Operation Nightfall was too hazardous to reveal. She had removed 12 women from history in order to conceal a secret with the potential to destabilize governments. "Sarah, you have to understand." "Understand what?" Sarah's voice was rising, 5 years of restrained rage now bursting forth. "That you left me to die? That you told my mother I was dead while I was being tortured in a Syrian prison? That you gave me a fake name and a fake life and told me to forget everything I'd done for this country?" Torres felt the walls close in. She could see Detective Coleman looking closely through the glass, most likely documenting everything that was said. This conversation was meant to be damage management, a quiet cleanup of a scenario that may reveal one of the military's most dangerous secrets. Instead, it was turning into a long-overdue reckoning. "We thought," Torres started hesitantly. "You thought wrong," Sarah interjected. "We had intelligence that the mission was compromised. Someone in your chain of command sold us out, so we walked into a trap. You chose not to investigate and find out who betrayed us. It was easier to pretend we never existed." The truth hovered between them like a loaded gun. Torres had assumed as much, and he had spent numerous restless nights wondering how the enemy knew when and where Unit 77 would strike. However, investigating would have included acknowledging the unit's existence, which would have resulted in congressional hearings, media coverage, and the termination of programs that were keeping America secure. There were larger considerations, Torres replied softly. Larger than the lives of 12 women who trusted you. Sarah's eyes burned with cold rage. Admiral, do you want to know what really happened in Syria? Do you want to know what your larger considerations cost? Torres nodded, despite her instincts telling her to halt the conversation before it got any farther. Sarah leaned nearer, her voice lowering to a whisper that seemed more dangerous than a roar. Then buckle up, because you're about to find out why some secrets are too dangerous to keep. Torres spoke one word with the weight of 30 years of naval intelligence behind him, and Detective Coleman found himself in the corridor before he could understand the order. He watched the Admiral close the door and turn on a small device that would scramble any recording devices in the room. Whatever was about to happen was going to be off the books. Sarah eventually broke down when they were alone together. Her 3-day serenity cracked like glass, and she wept as 5 years of hidden trauma surfaced. They told me you were dead, Admiral. The whole unit. They said everyone was Kia when they pulled me out. Torres sat across from her, seeing not the shattered woman in front of her, but the skilled warrior who had volunteered for the most dangerous SEAL mission in history. Sarah Phantom Martinez was the best of the best, a marksman who could thread a needle from 800 yards, a linguist who spoke 4 Middle Eastern dialects fluently, and a soldier who had never failed a mission before Operation Nightfall. We had to let the world think you were dead, even you, Torres said, his voice husky with 5 years of remorse. The alternative was worse. Worse than having me think my entire squad was killed? Worse than giving me a phony identity and telling me to forget everything I'd sacrificed. Sarah's voice shook. Do you know what it's like to cry for people who are still alive? To carry that guilt every day. Torres took out a tablet and entered a sequence of numbers that would have set off alarms at 3 distinct government agencies. The screen sprang to life, revealing classified documents that were not supposed to exist. Sarah, your team hasn't died. They're all alive, living under other names, and believing the same thing you did, that they were the sole survivors. Sarah stared at the computer in shock. There were contemporary images of Rodriguez working as a nurse in Seattle, Chin teaching martial arts in Denver, and Williams owning a tiny bookstore in Maine. They all lived as ghosts, just like her. Why have you done this to us? Sarah whispered. Torres closed the iPad and leaned back in her chair. Because Operation Nightfall wasn't simply a mission, Sarah. It was a proof of concept, a demonstration that a new sort of combat was feasible. Women agents who could penetrate terrorist organizations in ways men never could. You weren't simply SEALs, you were the future of special operations. The truth came out in pieces, each revelation more devastating than the last. Unit 77 had been the Pentagon's most classified joint operation between Naval Special Warfare and the CIA. Their first major assignment had been to infiltrate a terrorist cell in Syria that was planning attacks on American soil. The intelligence had been good. We had a source inside the group, Torres added, someone who'd been feeding us information for months. The goal was simple: get in, identify the leadership, destroy the threat, and get out. Clean and surgical. But it was a trap, Sarah remarked, her voice lifeless. The largest trap in contemporary warfare history. Our source wasn't just compromised, he was a double agent from the outset. The entire terrorist group was a facade designed to draw in American Special Operations personnel. They knew we were coming before we even left the base. Sarah closed her eyes, remembering the night everything went wrong. The team had approached by submarine, swimming 2 miles to shore in the dead of night. The compound had been exactly where intelligence said it would be, the guards positioned exactly as briefed. It had seemed too easy, but they'd been trained to trust their intel. We walked right into it, Sarah claimed. 12 of the Navy's best, and we walked right into the most sophisticated ambush in military history. The enemy had been planning it for over a year, Torres claimed. Studying our tactics, learning how we operate, understanding exactly how we'd approach the target and how we'd react when things went wrong. The ambush had been ideal. The first explosion had disrupted their communications, cutting them off from extraction. The second had collapsed part of the structure, dividing the crew. By the time Sarah knew what was happening, half her unit was already seized. Rodriguez, Sarah mumbled, her voice scarcely audible. She was 20 feet away. I couldn't reach her. Before I could even voice a warning, they had her hooded and zip-tied. The enemy wanted prisoners, Torres claimed. They wanted to learn how American female spies were trained. You were unlike anything they'd met before, women who could fight like men but penetrate their groups using their own cultural beliefs against them. Sarah was the last to be apprehended. She had held out for 6 hours amid the rubble of the property before they finally caught her. She had murdered 11 enemy combatants before they knocked her down with a tranquilizer dart, and she had almost escaped twice during transport. 4 months, she responded. 4 months of hell, and you abandoned us there. We tried everything, Torres said, her voice cracking for the first time. Every extraction possibility, diplomatic conduit, and backdoor bargain. However, the adversary did not desire prisoner exchanges or ransom money. They wanted to break you, to show that American women were not as tough as American males. The enemy had studied psychological warfare and knew exactly how to get inside the minds of elite warriors, using everything from waterboarding to sexual assault, sleep deprivation to psychological manipulation. The torture was methodically designed not only to extract information, but also to destroy their sense of self. They made us watch, Sarah said, her voice distant. Every time one of us broke, they made the others watch. They wanted us to recognize each other's flaws, to lose faith in our training, our country, and ourselves. But you didn't break, Torres replied softly. Neither of you broke fully, even when they believed they had you. You were plotting your escape. Sarah's escape had been the stuff of legend, though the legend would never be told. She'd spent weeks working to loosen a piece of concrete in her cell wall, chipping away at it for minutes at a time when the guards weren't looking. When the time came, she'd used it to kill 3 guards and fight her way out of the compound. 47 miles, Sarah continued, with a dislocated shoulder and internal bleeding. 3 days of hiding during the day, following the North Star like a medieval pilgrim. You saved yourself, Torres told him. And in doing so, you saved the program. What do you mean? Torres turned the iPad back on and showed Sarah confidential files from the aftermath of her escape. Your escape path led our forces directly to the facility. We were able to extract the remainder of your unit within 72 hours. More importantly, we arrested the entire terrorist network, including the double agent who had set you up. Sarah gazed at the television and saw photographs of her friends being taken onto medical helicopters, alive but injured, truly alive. They were all physically present. That's why we had to erase all of you mentally. Torres trailed off with air quotes. The assignment was too sensitive to discuss, but we couldn't deny the trauma. We offered you all new identities, new lifestyles, and the opportunity to grieve without the pressure of keeping state secrets. But we weren't healing, Sarah told me. We were dying inside, thinking we were alone, thinking we'd failed. I know, Torres remarked, her voice full of regret after 5 years. I made a mistake. I believed I was safeguarding you, the program, and national security. Instead, I was simply protecting myself. Sarah observed the Admiral's face, recognizing how much the cover-up had cost her. She appeared older than her years, worn down by keeping secrets and living with the knowledge that her decisions had wrecked the lives of 12 people who had put their trust in her. What now? Sarah asked. Torres remained silent for a long time, evaluating possibilities that all pointed to the same conclusion. Now we repair this. All of it. I'm going to reassemble your team, restore your true identities, and ensure you receive the recognition you deserve. The program, Unit 77, is being restarted. This time, with proper oversight, support systems, and accountability. And the ones who planned the ambush. Torres smiled, but it was the icy smile of someone who had been in the intelligence game for decades. Let's just say that justice has a long memory and an even longer reach. Within hours, the accusations against Sarah Martinez were dropped. The official report blamed inadequate proof, but Detective Coleman knew better. He'd seen Admiral Torres' eyes and heard enough of their talk to recognize he'd walked into something far more serious than stolen valor. Sarah Martinez was killed in a vehicle accident on Route 15 that night. The lady who walked out of the police station had a new name, a new life, and most importantly, the knowledge that she had earned the right to call herself a SEAL. But more crucially, she had reclaimed the things she had lost in a Syrian prison 5 years earlier, her team. The reunion would take place at a secure facility outside of Washington, where 12 women would see each other for the first time since the night their world ended. They would cry, rage, and grieve for the years they'd lost, but they would do so together, as sisters who had been through hell and survived. Admiral Rebecca Torres would begin the long process of reconstructing Unit 77 somewhere in the Pentagon, determined not to allow politics and secrets damage the lives of the men who had put their trust in her. The ghosts were returning home.